So, with the conclusion of the Agrest arc at the end of Season 5 of Miraculous Ladybug, I've been sort of reflecting on how much the show's changed from season to season, and figured that now that the first big saga of the show's run is over, maybe it's time to give a season by season ranking, as it were. There have been a lot of strong opinions on each of the seasons and their general quality, and this could end up being a video that is chock full of spicy takes, so yeah, good luck to me, hey? And I guess we could just sit around talking and waffling on forever and ever, but that is boring, so let's get into the rankings, shall we? Okay, so we got 5 seasons, and we got to establish that hierarchy. And honestly, there's a lot of things you can take into account when you look at these rankings, but for the most part, I think you just have to look at it from the perspective of how did it feel when you watched it? Were things stale, well received, story threads they set up, did that go anywhere? All that sort of thing. Okay, so let's get into it, shall we? Okay, so for me, the definitive worst season is Season 3. There's no doubt about it. I think if you polled most fans, or went through the old posts from that time, you're going to find the most discontent surrounding the content of Season 3. For starters, it has one of the worst finales ever in Miracle Queen. I have found very few people that genuinely like that episode. It was largely considered to be absolute hot garbage. For starters, it was a pretty generic villain, Chloe's being her evil Queen Bee variant, which was a character that we'd already seen many times, and it felt very oversaturated. And also, it infamously backtracked the character growth and development that Chloe had been undergoing since Season 2. She'd started shaping into something of an anti-hero, I guess, and realizing that she hadn't been a good person, and actually genuinely caring about the fact that she wasn't being a good person, due to her desire to live up to Ladybug's legacy. People at the time were very, very hyped about this development, as her character had quickly become very stale as a villain. But nope, turns out it was all a bunch of BS, and she's an irredeemable piece of trash character. Yeah, look, it turns out people don't like it when you dedicate 2 whole seasons to the growth of a character, only for the creators to backtrack and then claim this was a good decision, that it was always the plan, and was best for the story. Okay, asterisk. Okay. Sure. On top of that, despite the influx of new heroes in an attempt to freshen up the format somewhat and add some variety, this was the season that by far felt the most stale, the most plodding. Not much happened, the episodes all had the same formula, and it just felt like everything was moving at a snail's pace. And that was made even worse by the wacky slow release schedule of the episodes. Just, ugh. Like there were some bright spots in there, but for the most part it was very, very dull. And with some truly baffling story decisions that just make you shake your head, there's no other place for this than at the bottom. Next up might be controversial, I don't know, but it's Season 1. And it's not because it's bad or anything like that, but simply because Season 1 across the board, with pretty much every show ever, is the weakest one. That's because you have to spend so much time establishing everything. The world, the characters, the storyline, the personalities, the relationships, all that sort of thing. And that comes to the point that the actual progression of the show gets severely bogged down. Plus, a lot of those characters are still in their infancy stage. That early season madness of needing to be properly fleshed out and established. And we often see personality shifts between seasons 1 and 2. That's very common. We often see slight dynamic changes as the creative team tries to nail down the vision of the character they desire and that the fans like. So yeah, very much feels like the baseline season. It's vanilla. It's the one you're going to measure the rest against. And you want the show to keep getting better and not peak with Season 1, so ideally, you actually want Season 1 to be on the bottom. You want it to be the worst. Not bad, but the worst. Because then the show's going to keep growing, keep progressing. And for the most part, that is what we've seen. Season 1 was okay for its time, but even then it was basic. And so I don't think you can put it any higher than that. It's just a building block. Really strong and good building block, but that's all it was. And if I'm being honest, it is very tedious to sit through these days. The show really has come a long way. Next up, I'd say Season 5. I'll be honest, I was close to pushing this one down even further, but I figured the overall story quality and the overall episode quality is still higher than Season 1. Even though at times it did get a bit of hate, but I think that was just general discontent as well. But there is a lot of good stuff in Season 5 as well. We got a lot of cool payoffs to long-running storylines, a lot of Gabe reveals, Emily reveals, Felix and Kagami, Adrian and Marinette at long last got together. They kicked the terrible Chloe storyline to the curb for good, but of course not before giving it one last horrible hurrah. There was more representation, all the minor heroes became permanent at the end, which is something I really liked. We saw top tier fight sequences and action, interesting setups with the Lila stuff, actual decent evil plans from Gabe for once instead of sending out low tier henchmen who get easily beaten with him just sitting there wondering where it all went wrong. He actually had genuinely good plans and they had to beat him with plot armor. That's how Chadley he was. Hell yeah, Gabe. But that being said, there were a lot of problems too. The season 4 Luca payoff with him knowing their identities was completely bungled, and instead he became a guardian monk off screen for some reason. Felix, one of the best written characters in the history of the show, goes missing in action for most of the season, and then has a really half-hearted redemption after he fully betrayed the heroes at the end of last season. He's a great character, but he needed more there. On top of that, the ending to the Chloe storyline was weird, particularly with Andre somehow being a good guy there. Also, Chloe still being a major villain at this stage of the show was just ridiculous. Like, come on. She's beyond stale at this stage. She was stale in season 3. She was stale in season 2 just before she started her redemption. Imagine that now. Whew. They just recycled her same old storylines ad nauseum. She bullies, someone gets akumatized, rinse, repeat. And then on top of that, we have the sidelining of Adrian as a major character in his own storyline with his dad, because during the finale, who takes both the Miraculouses? Oh, right, that's Ladybug. And Adrian's crying in prison. Seriously? His dad's the major villain. You're gonna do this to him? Ugh. That finale, whew, nothing to write home about, let's be real. It had a lot of promise and a lot of stuff to enjoy, but season 5 really did bungle a lot of the conclusions to various storylines, which hampered my overall enjoyment. And then of all things, you're going to bungle the grand finale to the story that's lasted 5 seasons, taken years to get to? Nah. Like, a lot of the individual episodes were very good, and they did up the ante in terms of character development and story pace, and that's what keeps it out of contention for the bottom spot for me. Next up, we're going to go season 4, and this one did suffer a little bit from having to deal with the fallout of the poorly received season 3 finale. So they just had to keep beating that dead horse with the Chloe storyline, which was bad. But then they added in Zoe as well, who's literally just Chloe but nice. That's it. Feels like she was never needed to exist. They could have just kept Chloe, but sure, whatever. She's pretty cool, and she had some moments in season 5 that did set her apart from the pack. On top of that, after setting up some alternate ships, which would very obviously then lead into the final ship, Adrian and Marinette, the creators decided to randomly break up Lucanet and Adragami after a single episode, and just return to the status quo of Marinette pining instead. That was very lame, and thus the story returned to moving at snail pace once more. But whilst that was all quite bad, there was also so much cool shit peppered in here too. They had some of the most exciting episodes in the show's run. They had more stuff with the Guardians and their return. We saw further development of Lila as a future main villain. Kagami and Marinette developed a really wholesome friendship. They set up the Luca identity reveals that ultimately got squandered. Alia was set up as the definitive third main character, which was really exciting, and even learned Marinette's identity. That was awesome. In fact, we saw a lot more development from all the side heroes. That was exciting. We saw Felix develop into a really, really hotly anticipated character. Like, seriously, Felix was such a revelation this season. Anytime he appears, you're getting intrigue, suspense, plot development. Oh, glorious plot development. That's what I'm talking about. And on top of that, the 2-part finale was an absolute banger of a double episode that set up so much interesting shit for season 5. And here was actually where they started having Gabe come up with interesting and good plans where he used genuine strategy instead of just throwing shit at the wall. Which sadly meant that the heroes had to beat him with copious plot armor. But oh well. It still made him look good, which was good because he's your main antagonist, and he'd looked like a chump for 3 seasons. Which brings us at long last to season 2, which when you break it down episode by episode, probably doesn't have the best individual episodes, let's be real. But I think it was more a perfect storm situation for me. It improved upon the Monster of the Week type of vibe that season 1 had, but it hadn't yet gotten stale or had the story drag out too much. We were getting fresh characters, more info on the Miraculouses, the Chloe redemption arc was in full swing, we had the mystery about Emily going on, Natalie was starting to simp after Gabe, which was very interesting, and all the while it maintained that initial vibe of mystery and suspense. The show still had this really cool mystique that surrounded it. And honestly, I feel like this season is where it hit its peak in terms of pop culture saturation, when suddenly heaps of people all at once were talking about it, watching it, and engaging with it. It was momentum that it would hold on to coming right through season 3 until it was squandered with that bad finale. Then it lost a lot of steam, a lot of goodwill, and it would continually build itself back up and then drop off again. But for me, season 2 was that perfect place where the show fired on all cylinders and the negativity hadn't quite set in just yet. And so I think that's why I enjoyed it so much. It was pretty much as perfect as it could be. And whilst the highs were not as high as later seasons, the lows weren't as low either. And also that finale double episode, yet another certified banger. Hell yeah! And so, Yeah, that's got to be it in terms of rankings for now. After all, we've run out of seasons. Make more show, Asterisk. Come on, son. And so, with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the ranking? Do you agree, disagree? Anything you'd change? You want to just rant at me in the comments? I'm fine with that. And so, I am curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.